Right.
Pretty sure, yeah. All right, I guess we'll start on time so everybody can get their dinners early or hit, make their planes. This session is My Brain is Full, keeping pace with front-end and UX innovations. So if you're here expecting something else, this is not the right room. This is also way more people than I expected, so thank you all for staying until Thursday. We were totally ready to play to an empty house and just tell jokes and show meme GIFs, but apparently we have to,
We might still do that.
We're going to have to do our job today.
Yeah, thanks for coming out for the last session. I appreciate that. Fail.
Please work. Oh, here we go. Okay, my name is David Wong. I'm Eatings on Twitter, and this is my partner in crime, Brian Wald.
Yeah.
We both are solutions architects at Acquia, and we've been sleeping for the last 4 days in an Airstream trailer on East Austin. So most of these ideas came from that experience. So if they're a little kooky, blame the Airstream. Before we start, let's take a show of hands here. Who here considers themselves a front-end person? Okay, a better question. Who here does not consider themselves a front-end person? Okay. Okay. There'll be something for you, too. Oh. You might have to wait till the end, but there'll be something for you here. So sort of the gist of this entire, our thesis is front-end developers are expected to know a lot. And I'm guessing the majority of you out here who are doing front-end would not disagree with this statement. No, really, they're expected to know a lot. Here's a representative Far Side cartoon for those of us who are old enough to remember Far Side being in the newspaper. There's a child with a particularly small head saying, "Mr. Osborne, may I be excused? My brain is full." And this is sort of the general feeling that a lot of folks that I've talked to, or both of us have talked to, have expressed about what's happening to the state of the web, especially in the front end, and how one's career or one's job might fit into it. I'm going to read a quote. Oh, Jesus, what is wrong with that?
It's your phone.
No, it's not.
Oh.
Okay. There's a quote from Frank Camaro. Who here knows who Frank Camaro is, the designer? Okay, not a few of you. Frank Camaro is a print and web and interactive designer of no small renown. He's worked for, if you look at his client list, it's really big. And he has a very popular blog, and he's an ace designer. But this was a blog post he wrote, less than a month ago. And the quote is, "It's time to come clean. GitHub is confusing. Git is confusinger. Pretty much everything in a modern web stack no longer makes sense to me, and nobody explains it well, because they assume I know some fundamental piece of information that everyone takes for granted and no one documented. Almost as if there was a secret spread around to most everyone sometime in 2012, yet I somehow missed because, life was happening to me. So I've given up on trying to understand, even the parts where I try to comprehend what everyone else is working on that warrants that kind of complexity, and now I fear that makes me irrelevant. So I nestle close to the story that my value is in my, quote, ideas and capability to, quote, make sense of things, even though I can't make sense of any of the above. But really, maybe I'm doing okay, because it's all too much to know. Let the kids have it." And just let me put it this way. Frank Camaro is under the age of 35.
Yeah.
So this is not an old man, shaving his neck beard, talking about the web. This is somebody our age or possibly younger. So how did we get here? This is just to warn you. This is not going to be a very long presentation, but we're going to take a little short history here.
So, so here's the cut of Drupal 7 Alpha 1, which released on January 15th, 2010. And this is where we're at. DrupalCon SF was happening in April 2010. And I just wanted to point out, let's take a look at some of those tracks that are happening in 2010. So we have things like, theme preprocess functions. We have things like a jQuery for designers, PSDs to HTML. Like that was a thing that we were doing back then. We were learning about typography and all of these things like that. These are things that we would consider as themers. We were considered, these were things that we had to kind of just figure out because things were moving so fast and we wanted to, take a look at what was the next possibility. And so then let's take a look at the next year. And what I'm trying to point out here is let's take a look at the tracks here. Okay, so we have a track for theming in this year in Chicago. We also had a track for design and UX. And look at all the rest of the tracks. You have pretty much standard. This has been the same tracks for the last 5 years. Every other one has been very, very similar in terms of development, DevOps, and so forth. And so then Denver happened, and it suddenly changed again. Now we have mobile. Now we have a design UX. The theming one went away. We don't have a front end track. And then we jump forward to today. So I skipped 1 year, but you get the idea. So let's take a look at now. So we don't have that theming one anymore. We don't have the mobile one anymore. Now we have a front end one, and we have a UX one. And it's just one of those things that's just changed so much. But all the other tracks have stayed pretty much the same. So we have to adapt every year, and everything's changing every year. And it's not even just like simple components. The entire basis of what we do has changed over these years.
And in short, nobody knows where to put us, right? Now we have a front-end track now. Maybe it's better, maybe it isn't. Maybe it'll go away next year. But over the last 5 years, there hasn't been any consistency on where this sort of thing that we're going to talk about has sat. And there's confusion throughout the Drupal universe among the developers and the community at large about what kind of role front-end plays and what kind of skill set go with it. And it's the kind of thing we're going to talk about today in the presentation. So the state of the web as Drupal 7 was released. This is 4 years ago. Drupal 7, this is currently the still active version of Drupal that we've been working with up to this point. When it launched, or when it was released, rather, in 2010, IE 7.8.6 had 56% market share. Who remembers this kind of thing? IE 6 support wasn't like a joke or an add-on fee. It was a thing,
And no one was thinking about mobile.
Yeah, and then
2%.
No mobile, right? What was mobile? My pager was mobile, Everybody loved static CSS grid frameworks. And shout out to Massimo Vignelli, if anybody knows from him, just passed away a couple days ago. If you haven't seen Helvetica, absolutely see it. Grids, as we know today, would not exist.
Godfather of them, yeah.
Who remembers Blueprint CSS? Drupal.org was originally prototyped against Blueprint CSS, and to my knowledge, still is based on its grid. Who remembers 960 GS?
There you go.
Who's gone to a 960 or Blueprint session at a DrupalCon?
Yeah.
Web typography. And sorry, if Angie, if you're here, I copied this slide off of you. This is your font stack until not too long ago.
Choices. That was it. And if you want to do something else, it was going to look like this. You were going to have to inject Flash into your site that was not highlightable, and you had to use these crazy tags, and you were like, oh, what happens about the SEO and all kinds of crazy stuff just to get some different fonts to show up. And then it didn't work on mobile. So there's that.
When Drupal 7 launched, we had competing JavaScript libraries. This was an active question at the time. Who here has built anything on Mood Tools or Prototype ever? Right. So
What about in the last 2 years? Exactly.
Right, yeah.
I'd hope not.
This was an open question, and I'm glad Morton's in this room because I was thinking of him when I read this slide. The need for front-enders to learn version control was still an object of active debate as recently as the launch of Drupal 7. It wasn't, maybe themers don't have to learn version control. Maybe you can just get away with doing what they were doing.
FTP.
Yeah, like why would they need to revision their code? That sort of thing. The ability to maybe possibly use CSS3 was a major point of contention. Like, oh, I don't know about this progressive enhancement thing. These cut up sprites are working pretty good for us. And
rounded corners were really cool. So you had to do that. And how are you going to do that with those images in the corners? Positioned right.
Lifetime of Drupal 7, the same stack we were using before. All these assumptions are still in place. And so the Drupal front end during this time, you were a, quote, themer. Who here still describes themselves as a themer? Either in title or on their card or by other people?
It's okay.
Okay, Morton, you don't count. So this is, your title might be something fancy. Other people might have used a different title for you, in 2009, 2010. And maybe this is the way that you use to describe yourself. But the greater Drupal community acknowledges you as a themer. And a themer with it comes, with theming comes a certain set of implicit definitions, which we'll go to in a little bit. At the time, when Drupal 7 launched, this is your media query. You have style sheets that print your print media style sheet, injected into the info file. This is a media query. This is your style sheet, writing really, really long selectors in line, and hoping that targets the right, H2 in your views.
And this was your job. This is what you were doing. This is what people thought of you as. Oh, okay, so we finished our application. Now hand it off, and they'll make this HTML.
To make sites that look like this.
Or this.
Or this. That's the state of Drupal when Drupal 7 launched, and the state of the front end. So what's happened? And I'm sure a lot of you have different experiences about what's happened, but we'll cover some
Or
of the
when it
highlights.
happened.
Or when it happened, right. It happened a little differently for everybody, I guess.
Right. So HTML5 and CSS3 happened. That was a big thing. That was a big game changer for everything that we just talked about. No longer having to slice up your PSDs and insert columns for various different images to make them rounded corners. You could use that in CSS, and it was probably okay because the browsers were changing. People were using browsers for the most part that were advanced enough to handle these types of things. They had this built in. We were progressing, moving away from the static HTML pages to applications that could be rendered in the DOM and be handled and do things like this in a more sufficient way.
I want to point out this little inflection point, that the blue line is IE and the green line is Chrome. That was a very happy day. And that actually happened in, I think, 2013, so you should have clapped them. It's no thing now, whatever. Mobile happened. I think this goes without saying. I'm sure every single one of you in this room has a device in their pocket that's directly responsible for changing the front-end landscape in our industry and continues to use it. That's not going away. So that led to
M.dot sites.
Who here's built an M.dot site?
Yes.
Who here's still building an M.dot site?
Oh, thank God. Oh.
Oh, congratulations. Which led to mobile web apps. Who here's built a site on jQuery Mobile? Who here's built a site on something like jQuery Mobile, something that faked up your site?
Your touch gestures and all those types of things.
Guys in the back, there's more seats in the front if you'd like. Come on down.
Yeah.
Price is right.
You don't have to listen now.
Adaptive websites. Who here's built an adaptive website, a site that with fixed width on a different device? Okay. And then just a little over exactly 4 years ago, the 25th of May, I think it was, this article was published. Who here recognizes what this article is?
Yeah.
So this is the original Ethan Marcotte article on A List Apart describing responsive web design. And this, in addition to mobile, more than anything, has completely shattered the game when it comes to front end. And this idea of progressive enhancement, which I thought was total BS, before mobile and responsive came out, is totally a thing, like a capital T thing. This isn't just a buzzword that's thrown about. Progressive enhancement is an actual practice that is alive and well and even standard today.
And before all the tools, that was really hard to do.
Yeah,
it was not something that was just you could just do because you had something that was going to make it easy for you. It was like you had to spell everything out. You had to use browser prefixes. You had to do all kinds of crazy stuff.
So let's pause for a second to consider here. All of this change happened during Drupal 7's lifetime. Hell, it's still Drupal 7's lifetime. All this happened, and Drupal 7, the tarball you download off of Drupal, or the Git repo you clone off of git.drupal.org, the same software. None of it has changed. All the assumptions that went into making Drupal 7, the Drupal 7 core, are still there, pre all these revolutionary things. And we're still building sites on top of it.
I want to point out it's not like a blame thing that this hasn't changed. It's just one of those things that I don't think people were quite prepared for how quickly things moved. I think earlier I was watching one of Angie's speeches, and she said you could take any word in the dictionary and add JS to it, and you have a project. So at this time it was something that we didn't know how it was going to change and how quickly things had and what kind of fads were going to come and go, and people were just trying to make the best of what their situation was because it sucked mostly.
So meanwhile, in the rest of the web world that is outside of Drupal, Ruby's taken off, right? And Rails and opinionated frameworks and all these other web frameworks that you can build viable websites, web applications out of, increase in popularity. And they have their own way of doing things, which is many times diametrically opposed to the way Drupal does things. And there's an entire ecosystem of people that are used to building things a different way, with a different perspective. JavaScript became cool again. And JavaScript, when I was in college, was like, what the hell? Like, it makes things blink, Like JavaScript suddenly is the cool language. Since everybody already knows it, let's just use it everywhere, right? So in the back end, on the front end, for automation, for even more automation, for managing your packages, and what the hell, for everything. Right? But JavaScript is still JavaScript, and if you guys have seen the book, right, this is the definitive JavaScript guide, and this is JavaScript the good parts, which is like a quarter of the size. So maybe JavaScript isn't awesome after all. So let's write a meta language that compiles down to JavaScript. Who's used CoffeeScript here before? Okay, the same idea as CoffeeScript. Sure, let's do it with HTML.
Yep.
Who's written Haml before?
Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
Okay, and there's a little more
CSS. It's much more large audience here for this one. So things like Sass come into play, and things like less, and things like stylus. That was the thing for a little while, but
it's still kind of a thing. It's still kind of a thing.
But the point is, it was one of these things that we've gotten to this point where we're like, okay, we have to get some sort of tools to make this manageable. There's just too much. We're dealing with too much of an inconsistency across all of the browser stacks, all of OS, and everything like that. So we started doing all of these things that make it more manageable and take care of all of the tedious, annoying pieces of it. That's why this came about.
Frameworks, and then libraries on top of frameworks, and then libraries on top of libraries on top of frameworks. Frameworks for layouts, frameworks for buttons. You get the idea. There's a lot of stuff. And there's stuff on top of stuff, and stuff on top of stuff. But still, this one's yours.
Have you ever heard anyone say that, when they're standing over your shoulder, this looks like a Drupal site? You probably heard that once or twice before, and it's because, well, let's take a step back and think about why that happens. Well, it's because Drupal framework had dictated the design patterns. They had injected these design patterns that show up on every display layer on every Drupal site, one way or another. I mean, how many of you spent so much time taking out pieces from Drupal to make it display better? And forms, all those things. You spend so much time doing that, and you're like, why am I doing this? It's like, how do I bill a client for taking away things? And so you got output methods from default stylings, which I just mentioned, and you might have things that look like this. These are some of the design patterns that came about, and you have menus that look like this one, and you have forms that look like this. And so we're essentially what we're doing here is we're solving for an entirely new universe at this point. Entirely new use cases. Everything is changing rapidly, and people want things to look different than your standard stock Drupal site.
But we're still dealing with the same Drupal bullshit. From Drupal 6, the birth of Drupal 7, and Drupal 7, again, like we said, has not changed from the day it was launched to now, and we're still dealing with this no matter what the added expectations on top, mobile, responsive, whatever, are layered on top of it. We're still dealing with the same Drupal bullshit. I don't know if this is accurate now, but this is the 72nd slide, and so we're actually going to slow down here now. But we've gone through 72 slides, and we still haven't covered performance, touch, contextual awareness, testing, asset management, critical path, personalization, web components, shadow DOM, backbone underscore, designing in the browser, live prototyping, A/B testing. The list goes on, right? All of these things, sessions on them at DrupalCon, every DrupalCon now. You hear these words, you know these practices exist, you read Smashing Magazine, and you know somebody's doing it, and you probably ought to learn it. You get the point. My brain is full. Right, that's it. I'm getting off the train. I'm going to be a print designer now. Web is done.
I have thought about that.
Web is done. So one of these ideas that we wanted to present today is that front end is its own thing, and it's not a subset or an extension of design or
an afterthought.
Or an afterthought, absolutely, or a place you put your junior designers or developers rather. Front end is a thing. It's a thing that's complete with its own software stack. It's a thing that's complete with its own tooling, best practices, and testing. And it's a thing that's complete with its own skill set that's as unique to front end as back end skills are to back end. And to treat it as anything less would be unfair to both sides of the equation. So it's as complex and as diverse as the back end. And taking that into account, the old rules do not apply.
Yeah, it's no longer about styling the output and giving from the backend developer just spits something out and says good luck, throws it over the fence. We can't think that way anymore. I think that at the birth of where UX became a really big thing in the web, that kind of changed a little bit with the wireframing and the user testing and managing all of these things in the early stages so that they weren't doing that, which was a big problem. But it still happens. There's that notion of we'll deal with how this looks later, but we just have to get it functioning. And that's not really the way that we should be thinking about this.
And the front end isn't a place to put your junior developers until they get good enough to be module developers. Who here started here as a themer? No matter what your level of skill or your thing, you came in and you were just a basic themer. You, like, as a junior developer, of course theming is what you did. Who here started in, like, this is it's where people started, where you put them. And so what we want to suggest is about changing the process, the way front-end development is done, about equal footing in determining application architecture. Front-end isn't the thing you think about second after you get all your internals done. And that front-end is performed and practiced with as much rigor and maturity as the back-end, because front-end is as mature as the back-end now. The kind of software we're building, the kind of applications we're building on top of the back-end are as complex as those in the back-end itself.
Yeah. So a Drupal release cycle is long, which is a good thing. It's a really good thing. You know, it means that we have a mature software. It means that people are utilizing it. It means it's being adopted, and it's being adopted across all types of verticals. But the thing is, though, multiple front-end production frameworks have been come and gone during this time period of the span of Drupal. So, you know, we've had all kinds of things that have started out at the same time Drupal did and then went away before now, or starting now, and we have to somehow retrofit that to work with Drupal and make that, you know, bend into that method so you can actually use those things.
We need to be more able to readily adapt Drupal to front-end technologies as they emerge. Again, Drupal now, completely agnostic to it. Drupal is agnostic but also opinionated, and I think that's also the problem, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah.
So here's a slide. Here, Drupal 7's lifetime, you know, x-axis year.
So yeah, so what we did is we just looked at, you know, when did these frameworks come in? We looked for the first commit in Git and said, this is when they started, and, you know, this is approximately how long they were adopted. So, you know, Drupal 7 has spanned all of that, and it will be readily available for the next few years as production environments, and that's a great thing. But look at what's come and gone in that time period. You know, you have all of your CSS frameworks. You have Angular coming in at that point. 960 died off. jQuery mobile, like, kind of still there, but it's going away. And then you've got, you know, Grunt coming in, and Kufan has gone and, you know, started during the middle of the process and it died out at some point. And so, you know, what we were looking at is, so when you look at this back half of it, when we started Drupal 7, how would we possibly ever expect what this is going to look like? We don't know what the landscape of the front end is going to look like at that point. And vice versa. When we started out, we were like, okay, let's build this for these frameworks. That's cool. This is a cool thing right now. Let's make sure that these work really well. And so we built those, and those lasted, and the other ones were kind of shadowed away.
So the takeaway from that is we're never going to know what's going to come. It's going to come, and it's going to take us all by surprise, and it's going to be the next biggest thing. And the things that we bet on now that are going to be awesome are going to die without our say-so, you know, without asking us. We need to make Drupal more take-apartable. And we use the word take-apartable instead of decoupled, because decoupled is a word that has a lot of implications. You know, when you say decoupled, people start thinking, you know, like this very specific Angular thing. No, it needs to be more take-apartable. We need Drupal to be this thing where we can build the thing we want versus just clobbering and chiseling away at Drupal to get it close to what we really wanted. We want to build the thing we really want, not the thing that most closely approximates it.
Yeah, so so one of these things that I was thinking about is that we kind of need to build our front end to be resilient to that. And I say resilient in the way like, not like, you know, we have to make it something that doesn't do anything at all but just kind of lasts forever. I mean resilient in terms of, you know, being able to have like some sort of barrier in between that and the back end of Drupal and the front end of it, so that we don't have to have these really painful middle points. You know, we don't have to have these connector pieces to get what you want to do on the front end to work inside of a Drupal site.
And because the next big change is going to happen, whether we say so or not. It's going to happen, and it's going to hit Drupal, and Drupal has to be ready. Okay, Drupal's not a thing. Okay, we have to be ready to work with it or walk away from it or do something else, because we simply can't just sit pat working on the technologies of today 3 years from now. And so here's our little fancy slide of how such a thing might exist. We're certainly not core developers, but this is an idea.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't want to put that forward as like a final statement of how we think it would ever look, but, you know, it's just that idea of we have to kind of think about how do we plan for the future without knowing what the future is? And that's a really hard thing to do, but it's the only way that as we saw through all these slides, how everything's changed so fast, we know that that's only going to get faster, and it's only going to people have their fads and whatever else is going to come next for how they want to display their media and their sites. So maybe this is some way that you could do that. Think about it, at least.
So I hope you guys weren't coming here for a definitive answer, like, yes, this is how you manage your skills all the way to the end, and this is the track you need to go. Part of it is that, well, I sure as hell don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 years with any certainty. Else, I wouldn't be up here. I'd be placing, bets at the stock exchange. And at the same time, we can clearly see from the trend path of Drupal 7 that these kind of changes are going to happen. They're going to take us mostly by surprise, and we're going to catch up, and we're going to try to shove things into Drupal. And we might not be entirely successful in it. And the goal is that for Drupal to be successful, we need these front-end technologies to be more readily, the front-end, Drupal has to play ball with these front-end technologies, whatever they may be, as they come up. And what that exactly means to make Drupal more ball playable, that's a greater question. And
I think the thing is what it is more is you don't want Drupal to be opinionated. It has to be somewhat agnostic to the future of the front end, because Drupal is not a front end per se. It's a piece that can bubble up to that point, but and work with that very well. It can give you all the information and data you want and allow you to input it in 1,000 different ways and just and query it out however it has to happen. But that piece of it is very confusing and very hard to work with the current state.
So, one, I didn't expect this many people to show up, so thank you all for coming. Two, we figured there would be a lot of questions and/or discussion around this, and we're happy to talk about this. And if you guys think we're totally full of crap, please let us know too. There's a mic in the back, and please, somebody other than Morten, be the first person, because. No. People stood up.
Hi, I'm Peter.
Hi.
I'm very happy to see this session. This is what I've been preaching for about 6 years in Drupal, that we have a developer community who have been building Drupal for us as front-enders. What happened when you do that? You ask your back-end developers to build a front-end technology they don't care about, not interest them, has no relevance for them in their day-to-day work. We can choose to do that also in Drupal 8. We can just lean back and wait and hope they will give us something that we then hopefully, or rather we will end up in the same development circle where we cannot do anything on it. So the logical answer to that is we have a code sprint tomorrow, and you're all front-enders, and we need your opinions, because right now we're like 5 or 6 coders who's trying to fix all of these things and make it work in a way that we can actually decouple our front-end. That's one of our gold about trick, what we want to do, but we need more manpower and female power and geek power and design power and those who are actually going to use it. So the point is that everything you saw up on this screen of how pretty much the whole front end ran us over, that's going to happen again in 2 years if you don't come in and help out. So it's actually, you can look at yourself, is that a choice you're going to take? If you don't step up, that's the choice you take. So it's kind of a call to arms. It's now or never. This is the first time we had the chance to clear everything out of Drupal and make it new and actually change this action. This is the first time we're more than one front-ender in the issue queue. For reals, we actually have a community around it. So when you go home tonight and you figure out if you want to go to the code sprint tomorrow, take a look at the mirror in the morning and say, do I want to have a front end that's going to be run over? If you want to have that, don't show up.
So Morten makes a good point here in that Drupal 8 is still, it's somewhat in flux, and that the direction that Drupal 8 takes in things is still up to us to determine. And the people like us in the room who do have strong opinions about things, how front end ought to be, whether it be decoupled or not, can still influence this decision going forward.
Yeah, I think that also don't be discouraged because we are in the right direction with Drupal 8. There are a lot of things going in the right direction in terms of managing our libraries in the front end, so we don't have to require jQuery as our only JavaScript framework. We can do whatever we want with that. Those are the direction that it is going right now. It just needs some extra push. So you're not starting from scratch. People are on this, and this is the direction that it is going.
Thank you for doing this. This has been probably one of the awesomest presentations I've been to.
Thank you.
Throughout this whole thing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
The reason why, as soon as I get back, all of my bosses are going to watch this.
Yeah, no, totally.
So they can understand the situation. I feel that, and I might speak for many other people here. As a front-end developer, it's kind of where do we fit in with the rest of Drupal?
Yes, absolutely.
There's sort of this disambiguation between site builders and front-end developers. And it's oftentimes we wonder, where do we as front-end designers really fit into the greater Drupal thing? How do we really contribute back?
Yes.
And this is a really, really big point, that our role and the challenges that we're facing are much larger than anybody actually gives credit for.
Absolutely.
Anywhere close to it. And so if we really are going to continue doing what it is that we're doing, and we're going to continue using Drupal as the background behind what we do, then we really do need to get involved. And we really do need to contribute back and make our voices heard, that the presentation layer, the back end is going to be what it's going to be and everything, but if we don't have a good presentation layer, if it doesn't have that aesthetic quality, it's not going to be successful.
Thank you.
So the couple, I think it was on Wednesday, there was a session talking about object-oriented code, and specifically working with Twig and doing some of the really cool stuff that Drupal 8 can't do yet with Twig. And more importantly, what I was noticing is that it seems like with Drupal 8 we're going to have a much better separation between PHP code and our front end, so our front end really gets the attention that it deserves, as opposed to having to teach all my designers how to navigate an array. So is a part of keeping Drupal relevant from a front-end perspective, because as you saw, I mean, we've somehow managed to survive 4 years of very rapid change in the front-end world. Do you think that the new REST API features and maybe an expansion of that could go a long way towards giving us the flexibility we need, so that when AngularJS turns into something else and we have some other crazy thing we're supposed to use, that the data is still there, we can always work with it?
That's kind of the vision. Yeah. Well, you go first, Brian.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that the idea of having a RESTful API and just being able to, spit out whatever they want the data to be to the front end and letting us manipulate that how we want is ultimately kind of the right direction for that. There's two pieces of that, though. You can't just that will shadow a lot of people by doing that entirely. We can't just say, here's some stuff, good luck. I hope you know how to do all of these frameworks and build them from scratch, because that's hard too. So I think that Twig is a really good compromise in that way, and it helps people being able to use Twig that aren't experienced in PHP but still can get the proper layouts and without the security problems that they might run into by doing something strange that they copied from a blog, for instance. So I think that is a good point, that having the RESTful API is going to be a huge player in giving us the data that we need to do and manipulate how we want.
I was going to say, you guys should come to my decoupled Drupal BOF yesterday, but that wouldn't help at all. But no, seriously though, decoupled Drupal, headless Drupal, personal opinion, wave of the future. Absolutely.
Yep.
I have a favor to ask.
Sure.
You had a slide
Yep.
that said PSD to HTML.
Yep.
And I didn't get a chance to take a photo of it.
Oh, please. Oh, sure.
And
Oh.
I know that I could go and get the slides for this and then show it to my bosses and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I've been working at an agency for about 6 months, and their process is still this, and I feel that they're not really listening to me. And I find that I'm going to have to give a presentation from what I learned here at DrupalCon, and I would love to end my presentation of a video of 500 people, 300 people, saying this was my job or this was your job out loud, because I think then they would actually maybe.
Would you like me
come
to
on,
hold
come to the stage.
was?
Come to the stage.
So
Yeah.
can I put my camera?
Please, yeah. All right. Okay. So we're gonna. Is it on video?
It's videoing now. Should we say this was my job or this was yours?
Yeah, come up to the stage. Come on.
Come on.
Yeah, come up to the stage. You come
Someone
here.
has to
Yeah.
hold your phone.
Yeah, come on.
Or you can fold it.
Well, I'd probably need the slide.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Okay, so
I'll go.
That guy could hold it and you could go like this.
yeah. Okay, so we'll say it on 3. Okay, this was my job on 3. Okay.
Wait, can I go under the?
Yeah, that's what we're saying.
Come on up, dude.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
It's videotaping.
Yeah. Hey, this is the last session of DrupalCon, guys. We're I'm going straight to the bar after this. So, okay, on 3, right? 1. Oh, well, are you in? Okay.
1.
1, 2, 3. This was my job. Thanks, guys.
Was.
Next.
All right. Cool.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
two questions. One's a quick one. One may not be.
Sure.
The quick one is, why wasn't this on the first day?
I didn't have
We
a
didn't write the schedule.
We didn't write the schedule. Yeah.
Okay. The second one is, you guys had a slide earlier. I took a picture of it.
Yep.
It was the quote by Frank.
Oh, Camaro. Yes.
Yeah.
GitHub is confusing and Git is confusinger.
Yep.
Do you have a
Good quote.
30-second explanation of GitHub and Git? Because it is confusing.
Not a 3-second one.
30.
I could give you a 30 one, but
Yeah, 30 second.
After this, find me. I'll give you a 30-second one. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So as I've gone to the conference, I've talked to a lot of people, and some of them are in this room, and I've gotten to know a lot of really cool people. And I'm going to soapbox for a moment. I have the pleasure of implementing websites that are given to me by PDF.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a new one.
Yeah.
I know. And, while I love the people I work with, at the same time, some of these things happen. And this presentation has kind of inspired me and speaking to a lot of people here to choose a path forward.
Yep.
To, come together as a community and decide what is best. But how do we do that,
So I think one of the things that I personally want to inspire everybody in this room is that what you do outside of Drupal is not unusual. You come to Drupal, the Drupal world, and you're kind of like this misshapen thing, right? You're the ugly duckling. In the world outside of Drupal, people with engineering skills doing front end, it's totally effing normal. Like
Right.
you go to a Node meetup sometime, go to a Ruby meetup sometime. Like everybody is just like you. Well, maybe they don't look like you, but like their skill set is just like you. It's only in this weird Drupal universe where the front end is like this unusual thing that nobody knows what to do with. Do we have this weird problem like, well, where do we put the front end guy? Well, I'm gonna sit him next to the designer, or sit her next to the designer. There's a greater universe of front end practice outside the walls of Drupal, and Drupal would do well to look well beyond its internal walls to see what's going on out there, because really Drupal's not driving front-end change. You see all those technologies, they're not native to Drupal. That was other technologies coming into Drupal, right? And we're not pushing change in here. We're adopting change from other places. And if we don't want to be left behind, we would continue to look beyond our walls and examine why that kind of change isn't happening within Drupal itself.
Yeah, one of the points I was going to make earlier that I forgot to make was, when I was talking about how Angie said that, you could take a word and add JS and you have a project on GitHub. Well, that's always a critique of front-end developers. It's one of those things like, well, you guys just spin up something new, and that's the new thing that everyone uses. Like every 2 months, there's something new out there, and that's because it sucks the way that they give it to us right now. You have to find some new tools to make it work, and that's just more of a kind of a cry for help. Like, hey, I need something to make this easier for myself because this is taking way too long. This is way too complex. Everything's different in every different browser. And we need something to standardize that. They have the luxury of everything being standardized because it runs server side. That's easy. So how do you can't critique that because that's something that needs to change, and everyone's just taking their own take of that. And I think what you're going to see over time is that's not going to happen as often anymore. I think that we're starting to stabilize various different frameworks that are just work really well. So it's starting to get to this point where it's, if you looked at a graph, it's kind of I think it will look more like a bell curve where you started out with nothing and then we got like a million different projects. And then I think it's going to, those are going to die off because they were good ideas and people extrapolated beyond those, but it's going to stable out. And then there's going to be, some things that you're going to use for an extended period of time, not just 2 months.
Definitely agreed. So to finish up and to wrap up, my portion is as I've gotten to know a lot of people, and a lot of people will say Foundation, Omega, and we have a lot of people who have their preferred stacks, and and I've had mine, but I have sat and listened to every person and every person's ideas and theories and ideologies, and have, instead of trying to compare them against my own, I decided to just listen and listen and just, I don't rebuttal with them. I don't, I don't compare or discuss. I just listen. And so I was kind of going to say, this has worked out really well for me. I've actually come up with a pretty good idea to try with that does with my particular situation, PDFs. And how we could start prototyping. How can we move the organization that I'm with forward in such a way where you're not stepping on people's toes? You're not, making people feel like they're outdated. How do you bring them forward with you? So with that in mind, just want to extend to all of you: try something new, try something that you haven't done before, or just if somebody does something different than you, listen to them without in your mind thinking like, well, why do they do that? Instead, just listen, and then take it back and, apply it or don't. But otherwise, keep an open mind. And I think that's how we can move forward as a group.
Thanks. Jeremy?
So first, this is the second session in a row now I've gone to where people have been talking about front-end design. It's its own thing, and it's a big thing. So I started as a designer, and then I was a designer themer, and then I was a designer themer front-ender, sometimes developer. I've never worked in a shop that was big enough where you had 20 people who could specialize in all those different things. It's been me building a site, or if I'm lucky, me and one or two other people building a site. So are we at the point where that can't happen anymore? Because my head is exploding from all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Is there a way we could get back to that point where the tools are good enough and defined enough where someone could wrap their head around all this?
Yes and no. I'm going to caveat that by saying, if you look at the progression of any technology that's come up in the 20th century that's reached a state of maturity, right? It used to be that anybody and everybody could fix their own car because it was just that simple, right? And now, not only do you have mechanics, you have specialized mechanics. But at the same time, there are people who are hobbyists who are able to fix their own car, including their Tesla if they so choose. It's a question of personal will at some point too, whether you want to get good at everything. I don't think it's possible to be great at everything. That's it's like I want to be awesome at everything. Well, good luck, But specialization has its own rewards as well, and I don't think you should shy away from specialization because it makes you feel like you're being shut out of other avenues. It's not. Like as this kind of technology proliferates, the need for specialists only grows, not decreases.
Yeah, I kind of disagree with him on this.
That's fine.
What I wanted to say, though, not entirely, but in terms of specialization, I think that my approach for this type of thing is, if you can truly understand the fundamentals of what you're working with, if you can truly understand the DOM and the browser and understand, the core values of various different frameworks and knowing how to do, the fundamental JavaScript and things along those lines, you're going to be able to do anything. You're going to be able to learn what you need to learn. And then what you do is you take a project and you look at what you need to do for that project and what technology makes the most sense. I don't like the idea, and a lot of people probably disagree. I don't think that Drupal is the best thing for everything. I don't. I mean, I think that in the same way, I don't think that using some framework in the front end is the best for everything either. I don't think there's one thing that's the best. So it's like, what does my project need? What can I do with it? And then learning that to make it happen, because you've already got those fundamentals expert level at that. So that's my thought.
I agree.
Thanks for your great presentation.
Thank you.
I come from a small segment, maybe. I'm a Drupal educator. I teach Drupal to graduate design students in a design school. And so Drupal 8 scares me a lot because the curriculum is going to have to fill up their brain even more than it already does. But specifically, the thing I see, because I teach mostly people who become themers at the best, and maybe they're really just CSS artists. They're still PSD to HTML practice in my department, in fact. What would make Drupal 8 really more accessible for my students at the templating level would be to have some modular, pluggable templating engines. For example, like PHP template, I know, has a lot of limitations, but PHP is already taught in my school. Twig is not. So I have a whole new challenge in 15 weeks to teach Drupal 8 now. Is there a JavaScript server-side templating engine? That's another question. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, yes, there's many of them. Handlebars, mustache, things like that. Right. If you Google curly brace templating engine, you'll get like 100 pages of results. Right. But the gentleman behind you, the Nordic man with the backwards hat, may have an answer.
Yeah. I did a session yesterday. It's a 1 hour watch about how Drupal Twig works. You see that, and you're done.
Oh, I'm with you. I only have 45 hours of instruction per semester, though. I appreciate it. I
said 1 hour.
No,
that's
what it takes. My 45 hours that are
okay, but the thing is, we have simplified stuff in ways that is absurd.
Yeah, I'm not arguing with Twig as a choice. I'm just observing my dilemma.
Sure.
Pluggable templating engines for Drupal 8, where I could have a variety of choices for the underlying knowledge of my students, would be really brilliant. The other thing I'd say is that headless Drupal, or Drupal without a theme, is prevalent in a lot of development practices I see.
Yeah.
I heard you advocating for it. I'll share a takeaway that I got from the very last session in this room, which was a survey of a lot of site builders' pain points. The lack of preview, coming from my student level, would be a huge challenge for headless Drupal.
Yeah.
So I
totally agree. That was my point about having some sort of intermediate era of some sort of templating system like Twig to do that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Before everybody else starts trickling out, I think we're supposed to tell you to rate our session. I'll be like an Uber driver and say, I'll rate you high if you rate me high. So,
to the man who was just up here, I would say that you should lobby for another course for your department. Because Twig is a very valuable templating system, and it's used in a lot of different websites, not just Drupal. So that might be a different option. Or
yeah.
Oh wow. Cool.
But I think you could make a really, because if they're already teaching PHP,
right? Totally.
I also teach in a graphic design program in Ottawa, and we actually taught our students how to template with Jekyll, and they're committing on GitHub because the school won't give us server space because we're a design department.
Classic.
But then I can see their commits, and I can see when we're grading, I can see even if they push at 3 a.m., I can see all of their commits
that's
2 hours prior.
Your designers are committing to Git.
Yeah.
That's
GitHub,
freaking awesome.
Yeah. So. Because there's an app, so for Macs, so
makes it easier.
It's pretty easy for them.
Cool. I think that wraps it up. Thank you everybody for coming. This is way better than I expected.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
No, I'm sorry I missed the beginning. I was very unorganized.
It's fine. You're British, whatever.
I think it's partly that.
Yeah, it'll be in the session. I'll upload this in
I
just a
think that
second.
a lot of people come from a world of expecting to see something. You know, like I can read through these bits and know kind of what's happening. That's not there anymore. You're getting a page, you know, your JSON output, and then you have to convert that into something that's understandable in some sort of framework. That's the hard part, and that's the thing that I think is scary for a lot of people. And the piece that is going to be, it's going to be hard. And it's going to be a lot of frustrated people. But, you know, it's really the only way.
I mean, I like
it's really the only way. Yeah, totally.